exposing the propaganda and challenging you to use your brain. It's time to tap into the truth.
Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed time to tap into the truth. Welcome to tonight's broadcast. I hope you are having a great Wednesday evening wherever you may be. It is November the 27th, and it is the day before Thanksgiving. At least it is here in the States. Hope that every last one of you has the opportunity to be surrounded by family and friends and absolutely surrounded by love. At any rate, this is your ever so humble host, Tim Tapp, coming to you live from historic Roane County, Tennessee. And I wanted to go ahead and make sure that I got on air here wishing everyone a happy Thanksgiving, even if you are someone that doesn't necessarily celebrate that as a holiday. Hope that you have the opportunity just the same to be surrounded by family, friends, loved ones, and have the opportunity to just give thanks to whomever or whatever you may see as a spiritual guidepost in your life. And I say that because Thanksgiving here in the States is slowly changing, much as Christmas has already been forced to change due to political correctness and attacks on the ideology of Christianity. There's a large number of people that are involved in trying to push religious aspects from public life. One such group is the Freedom from Religion Foundation. You may recall we had a discussion about that not too long ago, back in August, actually, of this year. And it involved their attempt to inject themselves into a situation that was already well under control. And I'll go into a little more detail there shortly, but I wanted to go ahead and send out special holiday wishes, and I also wanted to make sure that everybody was aware that I'm on the air tonight because I'm going to be off the grid for the next several days. I'm going to spend some much-needed, required family time while I work on things here and while I work on next Sunday's Blog Talk show. So I wanted to go ahead and make an announcement there promoting next Sunday's show. On this upcoming Sunday, which will be December 1st, on Blog Talk at Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. I will be joined by Joe Carr, Tennessee State Representative, who is running for the Republican nomination for U.S. Senate. He is challenging Senator Lamar Alexander in the primary. Now, we've already had Danny Page on, who is challenging for the exact same spot. And we also have confirmations a little bit later in the year for other candidates, which we will focus on them as their appearance comes closer to their appearance, I should say. But the point is, Joe Carr is probably the person that most people think has the best chance of unseating Lamar Alexander, because he does already serve as a state representative. He has a political machine, so to speak. Most of the other candidates really kind of lack that savvy and experience, which raises the question of whether or not, perhaps, as a politician, instead of a citizen rising up to serve, maybe he's not exactly what the Tea Party folks would prefer. My thought process is that I haven't made a determination yet. So far, I like all of the candidates simply because they're all standing up to serve, based on the fact that they see a need. So at any rate, if you want to listen in to what Joe Carr has to say, then you are welcome to tune us in at Blog Talk this coming Sunday. Or, of course, you can always catch it on podcast after the fact. And that show, as well as this one, is available on iTunes. You can also find the Blog Talk Show on Stitcher.com. And you can find both this and the Blog Talk version of the show on TuneIn.com. So if you have the TuneIn app, or if you have the Stitcher app, you will be able to find us there as well. I would love to go into the do's and don'ts of Thanksgiving. The bottom line is, this is a holiday that we are supposed to be grateful for the things that are around us. Take a few moments to stop and think about the things that really sets our life apart. Focus on all the good things that we have around us and concentrate on the things that are most important. So I hope everyone has the opportunity to do that as well. Now, one of the great things about the Blog Talk version of the show is that it's a lot easier for folks to call in and for us to interact. And since Representative Carr will be on for a whole hour, we will be taking phone calls. We'll do that at about the 30-minute mark into the show. So if you're interested in asking Joe Carr a question, please do so. But also, as a result of that easier interaction, I'm announcing now that on the Blog Talk version of the show for the next several weeks, between now and January, while I will be on whatever topic that I'm on, as long as I'm not with a guest, I encourage people to call in and tell me about their favorite Christmas or general holiday traditions. Whatever your particular holiday belief is. I mean, if you've got a special Hanukkah tradition that you'd like to share, whatever. I welcome you to do so, because we are getting to that time of the year. We are moving swiftly into the Christmas season, which, is also Hanukkah for our Jewish friends. Will not be drawn into a debate or discussion about Kwanzaa. Don't try it. Don't bother. Hope that doesn't offend you, but Kwanzaa is completely made up. Made up by a man who pretended to be a radical leader the whole time he was rolling over and working as an FBI informant. So, how radical could he really be? Completely made up. If you celebrate Kwanzaa, fine. That's your business. It's up to you. But please, only call in with Christmas or Hanukkah or some other reasonable seasonal holiday. Now, as we focus on moving towards today's topic, we are going to be discussing the Freedom from Religion Foundation and their most recent court victory. But before sliding into that, one more bit of housekeeping. I'd like to encourage people. You've heard me talk in the past about PatriotSpace.com. Well, recently, the Lady Patriots, whether you've checked out their website, which you've also heard me highly recommend before, or checked out their internet radio show, they now have taken over Patriot Space, and it is changing to LadyPatriotSpace.com. They're upgrading some of the pages. They're making it very interesting as far as putting their special splash and their special touch. But it is still a social media site that is designed for patriots of any particular philosophy. You don't have to be a Tea Party kind of conservative to belong at Patriot Space, which is now Lady Patriot Space. You don't have to be a lady. It's designed for the gentlemen patriots as well. I'd also like to point out that the ladies of Lady Patriots have been very kind to me. They are a friend of the show. They have been very supportive of me and have been on my Blog Talk show several times, whether it's Diane Sorty or Dr. Sharon Schutz. And I still have to get a few other of the primary ladies of Lady Patriots to spend a little time on the show. They've been nice enough to invite me onto their show. And we had an interesting discussion just a couple of weeks ago. They're great folks. Would love for you to go ahead and check out LadyPatriotSpace.com. Maybe even sign up. I promise you won't be sorry if you're looking for true patriots that are trying to get away from all the extra erroneous fluff that you find on other social media sites like, I don't know, say Facebook, for example. Just saying. And, maybe you are a hardcore Tea Party kind of person. Well, whether you are or not, or if you're just plain conservative with libertarian leanings, you might also want to go ahead and check out teapartycommunity.com. Not necessarily trying to do a commercial for Tea Party Community, but they are also a great social media site where you have the opportunity to meet and run into a variety of hardcore libertarian constitutionalists. You can find some folks that are a little more hardcore, some folks that are less hardcore, some folks that are really there just to be social. It is a social media site after all. I recommend you check out both sides. Lady Patriots is up and coming, looking for more growth. I highly recommend them. And TeaPartyCommunity.com is doing exceptionally well. High membership, continuing to move into new projects and trying to help to fuel further Tea Party type projects. Bottom line is I highly recommend both. But, ultimately, as I always say, don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break before we get into the meat and potatoes of today's topic. And after the break, we'll go headlong and we'll go for the rest of the show. So hang in there and stay with us through the break. We'll be right back.
Tap into the truth. Check us out at tapintothetruth.com for our latest blog posts and for links to all of our past broadcasts. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and to follow us on Twitter. That's Tap Into the Truth right here on Spreaker Radio.
Yes, that's right here at Spreaker, and you can also find us at Blog Talk. Do hope you will check out tapintothetruth.com. You can find us on Facebook as well as follow us on Twitter. You can easily do both from tapintothetruth.com. Hope you'll visit there, check us out, look at all the pages, including the most recent blog posts. Speaking of which, I have posted a blog today. I really just don't find the time very often to write like I used to. So busy doing research and trying to work to get guests onto the show that spend a lot of time focused on doing this. And it takes up a lot of the time that I used to spend on writing. It's kind of a lame excuse, but it comes down to you have the family commitments. You have to do all these other things. It's basketball season now, too, here. So with the youngest daughter still actively playing, got to get her to practice and all this other wonderful stuff that's going on. It's a strain on the usual activities, and you got the time constraints, and it's tough. It's tough to make the time, but I had the opportunity to do that, and as it turns out, came across a story, and I had to post about this. Ultimately, once again, the Freedom from Religion Foundation found its way into an article that I had come across, and again, it's very aggravating. Now, you might remember back in August of this year, it's 2013 for those listening on the podcast in case you're checking us out from some point in the future. That was the first time that I spoke to you about the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They were offering their assistance to Jaleesa Martin, and you probably remember her from a little while back. She was the mother who had a child support magistrate order a name change for her son, whom she had named Messiah. That was right here in Tennessee. Now, the Freedom from Religion Foundation is a group of atheists and agnostics, and they're headquartered in Wisconsin. But they have fought all across the country to remove religion from everyone's daily life. They do this mostly by either going to court or by bullying local organizations, whether it be cities or civil groups or whatever. They bully them by threatening to go to court. And lots of times that'll go a long way towards getting folks to back up. In fact, they were recently involved in filing a lawsuit against Lenoir City here in Tennessee, which is actually just up the road a little bit, because their police officers wore a patch that included the word religion on it. They took them to court because a local police force... I don't know how the Freedom from Religion Foundation came across the fact that Lenoir City Police Force had the word religion on their official patch. But somehow they did, and they made a point of coming here and filing a lawsuit. And the city actually ended up acquiescing before it could be settled in court. Just another example of how they use the court system to bully their way through whatever. Well, it seems that the FFRF has won a case that can have a profound impact on organized religion across the nation if the ruling isn't overturned on appeal. This past Friday, that would be November 22nd, 2013, U.S. District Court Judge Barbara Crabb ruled in favor of the FFRF in a case where they were challenging the IRS exemption that gives clergy tax-free housing allowances. The FFRF argued that this exemption violated the constitutional concepts of separation of church and state and equal protection under the law. They even argued that if a tax-exempt religious group were allowed a housing subsidy, mark that word, important, I come back to it later, then other tax-exempt groups, like the FFRF, for example, should get one too. Now, the federal judge decided that the exemption was unconstitutional, saying that it, quote, provides a benefit to a religious person and no one else, even though doing so is not necessary to alleviate a special burden on religious exercise. Now, I'm guessing from that statement that she was focused more on the equal treatment under the law part of that argument. But it's still hard to say she didn't come out and dismiss the separation, the establishment clause, as it's referred to in most circles. Now, to be fair, Judge Crabb did say, well, she did stay the ruling until all appeals are exhausted. But just for your information, Crabb is the federal judge that ruled that the National Day of Prayer was unconstitutional back in 2010. I know some of you probably remember that. Now, I have news for both the FFRF and for the judge in this case. You can make any number of arguments against the tax exemption if you are so inclined, most of which don't, or at the very least shouldn't, hold any legal water. But you can make those arguments. The equal treatment one is sketchy, but I would let you make that argument and would consider it. However, this exemption in no way whatsoever violates the Establishment Clause because it does not favor any one faith over another, nor does it do anything to force any belief system on anyone. I'd like to remind my learned friends that this Establishment Clause is not as inclusive as many of them would like to make it. The clause only prevents the government from establishing a national religion, or, by extension, favoring any one religion over another. The exemption in question applies to about 44,000 ministers, priests, rabbis, imams, and others. And at that point, I think you can see my point about it not favoring one faith over another. If the ruling stands, which I don't believe that it could under the exemption clause argument, it would mean roughly a 5 to 10% cut in take-home pay for some clergy. Now, in this economy, especially going into Christmas, for crying out loud, who can afford to lose any of their income? And why would any person or group of persons look to cut into someone's income? They should be more interested in trying to make sure that their own income is improving rather than attacking someone else's. The case was decided in the District Court for the Western District of Wisconsin, and will most likely be appealed to the 7th Circuit, which very well could reverse the ruling. But if the 7th Circuit lets the ruling stand, then it will become precedent for courts not only in the Wisconsin, Illinois, and Indiana areas, that happens to be the region that the 7th Circuit is kind of over, but it will set precedent for all across the land. Now, for the record, the 7th Circuit did recently bar the enforcement of the contraceptive mandate in Obamacare. But, of course, that's being taken to the Supreme Court. Now, as bad as the attack on the income of these church leaders is, and I remind you here that the FFRF is after not just one or two individual cases where there might be some actual abuse going on. There are things at play in this case that are far worse. Take a look at the use of the word subsidy in the FFRF's argument. Look at Harry Reid's use of the nuclear option. look at the continuing attacks by the FFRF and other like groups on people of faith. In the use of the word subsidies in referring to the tax exemption, they show the typical political left thinking that all money belongs to the government and we should just be happy that they let us keep any of it. Using the term subsidy in place of tax cut, tax break, or tax exemption implies that there is somehow someone outside of the church being used as a general term here for all spiritual organizations, someone outside of the church who has to help pay for the housing allowances. This is clearly an attempt to control the language to win the argument, rather than win the argument on the merit of the argument. It's also an effort to, over time, make most people accept the idea that the government is entitled to the first piece of everyone's pie. While you can make an effective point that every time you exempt some form of income from the tax pool, that it makes it harder for those not exempt from paying to cover the government's tab, you could just as easily use the exact same logic to call for an end to all tax credits and tax exemptions at every economic level. Now, somehow I think if that argument was taken to that level, many of the people who might support attacking the clergy's housing allowance might rethink the whole subsidies argument. But make no mistake about it, there is a lot of potential tax revenue on the table here. The exemption is worth about $700 million a year, according to the Joint Committee on Taxation's estimate of federal tax expenditure. And, FYI, the Hazen-Tabor versus the EEOC case decided this past year that a teacher could be considered a minister. So the ruling in this case could go beyond just those we think of as clergy. And does anybody out there believe that, given an opportunity, that our government won't jump at the chance to pull in an additional $700 million regardless of its source? Add to that, the current bunch of statists running the show right now could grab that cash from organized church? Well, they might as well be part of the Tea Party groups that were targeted by the IRS. Sheesh. Now, secondly, also to keep in mind, Harry Reid just changed the Senate rules to reduce the number of votes needed to end a filibuster. That, of course, was called the nuclear option. Reid did this for the sole purpose of getting on with the so-called progressive agenda of stacking the federal courts with leftist activist judges who will be happy to slap down conservative challenges to unconstitutional laws and actions taken by our government. Excuse me. They want judges who would also be willing to legislate from the bench when they aren't happy with laws passed by conservatives. The idea is to get as many judges in place that will ignore the Constitution and simply side with their progressive arguments, regardless of the issue of the case. Like, I don't know, for example, maybe a judge who would rule that the National Day of Prayer is unconstitutional. A judge like that should be moved up to a higher court so that when those type of cases are appealed, they will have a much lesser chance of success. But the worst part of this is almost lost among all the talk of increased taxes and reduced income and activist judges stretching the limits of our founding documents. The open attack on religion in this country should be of the highest concern to all Americans, religious or not. This nation was founded on the concept of freedom of religion. That freedom of religion is what allows you to show your faith in whatever fashion you choose. There are, of course, naturally some limits. But if you're part of a religious group, you have the freedom to exercise that faith. And you also have the freedom to not exercise any faith or actively participate in any spirituality. That's part of that freedom of religion. Now, Annie Laurel Gaylor and Dan Barker, who are currently co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, hailed the decision, saying, quote, "May we say hallelujah." This decision agrees with us that Congress may not reward ministers for fighting a, quote, godless and anti-religious movement by letting them pay less income tax. The rest of us should not pay more because clergy pay less. Now that's a quote. But right there, they show their willingness to mislead people because no one outside of the churches is paying more because of these allowances. The clergy housing allowance tax-exempt status is not an establishment of religion, but in fact is the exact opposite. It's the federal government staying out of the affairs of religious groups in the U.S., and it is neutral to all religions. The FFRF also showed their hand earlier this year when the federal government offered them a tax break available to religious groups, and they rejected the offer. You see, they're not interested so much in equal treatment as they are in weakening organized religion through any means possible. They know that clergy in small congregations will be harmed greatly by this ruling if allowed to stand. These atheists are committed to the cause of ending religion in all its forms here in the United States, and I can't help but believe, if they're successful here, the whole world. They won't be successful. But you know, I really wish that these guys would have started their little crusade in a Muslim theocracy. I would love to see how successful their efforts would have been in Iran, for example. But you see, here in the United States, they're free to believe the way they do. And they can find like-minded people. They can join together. They can express their opinions freely. They can even raise money to further their cause. Here, they can petition the courts for fabricated transgressions. Here, they can find like-minded judges who will side with them, even if the law doesn't. The FFRF uses our system meant to protect our freedom of religion to attack it. I have a little more news for the Freedom from Religion Foundation and any other like-minded atheist group. And it's important to note right here that many atheist and agnostic groups don't attack Christians. They are just like-minded people who come together and decided, hey, this is this. This particular attack is against more than Christians, though. Just FYI. But for the Freedom from Religion Foundation and any other groups similar that think the same way, I've got a big piece of news. You are not superior to people of faith. You are not smarter. You are not more enlightened. You are not leading the way to some greater tomorrow. You are, in fact, missing out on an important part of the human experience, and for that, I pity you just a little bit. Now, I stand with Christ. I stand for the Constitution. I stand for the freedom of religion, not from religion. I stand for what I believe, but I also stand for your right to believe as you do. You have the right to not believe, but you do not have the right to tell me that I cannot. You do not have the right to attack me or my church just because you don't like it. And you most definitely do not have the right to twist the United States Constitution to serve your agenda of attacking people of faith. You're violating the very premise of the separation clause. You're using the establishment clause to justify an attack on religion in this country. And I hate to break it to you, but choosing to be atheist is a religion of itself. You're part of the religion of anti-believers. You don't have a right to force that on anyone else. You don't have a right to force me to put my cross and my prayer in a closet somewhere so that you don't have to see it. We also have freedom of speech in this country. And when applied properly, that means that you are guaranteed to become offended at some point. But ultimately, that's where this argument gets lost in court. Leftist, activist judges take the side of groups like Freedom from Religion Foundation because they think somehow that they're supposed to protect people from being offended. Here, under our Constitution, you're not protected from being offended. You are guaranteed that you will be offended. But you have the same choice that the rest of us do. If you hear something on the radio that you don't like, change the station. If you don't like something that you hear on a podcast here at Spreaker, find another podcast. Nobody's forcing you to listen. If you do so by choice. So then what's the problem? What is the real issue that you have with trying to take away part of someone's salary? Now, I will grant you that there are cases, there are occasions where this is undoubtedly being abused. But that's for the IRS to determine, not for you to go to court to try and force every small church that's barely even using the practice into some type of financial issue. Why should every priest, pastor, imam, whatever type of temple leader you may have, why should they all be forced because of your disbelief into a situation where suddenly part of their salary that had been exempted from tax because it was intended for a housing allowance, which in turn is considered to be an extension of the church itself. And of course, organized churches in this country are tax exempt. That's why the exemption was allowed in the first place. That argument was successfully made and accepted. You're still bullying, and you're still denying the very concepts of the Constitution that you claim to hold dear. There's no violation of equal treatment here, because all religions are being treated equally. It's also why there's no establishment involved. But when the federal government allows you to petition on that point, and you turn down what would have essentially gave you the same benefit, then you're obviously not concerned about equal treatment. At that point in time, you've made your decision, and the equal treatment clause should be tossed out as well. It's not a legitimate argument in the case, because you're not after equal treatment. You're after penalizing someone because they are someone of faith. I disagree with your outlook on life, but I don't condemn you for it. I don't want to penalize you for it. I'm concerned what the ultimate penalty that you will pay may be. But ultimately, that's your choice to make. It is now, and it always should be. By the same token, for every Christian, for every Jew, for every Muslim, for every Hindu, for every theist, whatever religion or whatever denomination therein you want to choose, it should be their choice too. You don't have a right to infringe upon our rights to choose or to practice. You don't have it. And the court needs to realize this. Separation of church and state, the Establishment Clause, has already been stretched to include far too many things that it never should have been allowed to. Hello, a police force having the word religion on their official patch does not constitute establishment. Saying a prayer before a high school football game does not constitute establishment. Honest judges looking at the law, understanding the law, could not possibly find any other way. That also takes us back to the dangers of the nuclear option in the Senate. Because the only reason Harry Reid did that is because they wanted to start stacking the court with, quote, vacancies, although none of them are dire, before the next set of elections. Before the midterm elections, because it's possible the Democrats could lose control of the Senate. And then Obama's picks would not be rubber-stamped. Judges that would side blindly with groups like Freedom from Religion are the kind of judges we do not need in our federal courts. Not because there's anything wrong with them thinking what they think or acting the way they do, but because our Constitution and our legal framework should be protecting those people of faith from attacks from people that are only attacking because of faith. That's tonight's show, everybody. That's got to be it. I do, once again, want to remind everybody, have a great, happy Thanksgiving. Hope everyone has a blast. Plenty of fun, food, excitement, and love. That's what I hope for everybody. In the meanwhile, don't forget to check us out, Blog Talk on Sunday. That'll probably be my next broadcast. Guys, it's been great. Love it. See you next time. We'll be back soon. Good night.